Did you know that there are 4 Aries serial killers who have Moon in Aries? In fact, 3 are male and 1 is female. So what do they have in common? They were born in different years, different decades, and even different countries. They had largely different lives. Some were married, some were not. Some acted alone, some had accomplices. Yet they all have Moon in Aries, and they were all motivated by greed. But that's not all. Keep watching to learn more about these killers. But before we start the investigation, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also turn on that notification bell so you never miss out on new videos. Here's how astrological profiling is going to go. We'll be comparing lives and criminal cases of serial killers who have the same aspect. In this case, Aries Sun conjunct Aries Moon. Bear in mind that one aspect doesn't make anyone a serial killer, and then one should look at the whole natal chart to figure it out. However, what we're doing here is breaking it down to smaller pieces we'll be analyzing thoroughly so that ultimately we can understand natal charts of serial killers as a whole. To do that, we have to compare them and not take them as isolated cases, adding our own interpretation of what their natal charts are telling us about their crimes. It's easy to interpret a serial killer's chart once you know what they've done. We're not doing that here. Instead, we're trying to find commonalities between their cases and natal charts. To better understand what we're doing here, here's an explanation. Criminal profilers have created classifications of criminal behavior based on the observations of the crime scenes, victimology, perpetrators' background, traits, and crime characteristics by comparing numerous cases and finding commonalities between them. The conclusion was that when crimes have certain characteristics, then a certain type of perpetrator is much more likely to have committed them. Here is an example, and it's just illustrative. It is observed that in certain types of crimes, the perpetrator is usually a white male in his early 20s, unemployed, who lives with his mother. Does it mean that every white male in his early 20s who is unemployed and lives with his mother will become a killer? Of course not. It's the same with astrology. While we're trying to understand which characteristics of a crime are tied to which planetary position or aspect, it doesn't mean that everyone with that planetary position will commit the same type of crime. Fortunately, most people don't engage in criminal behavior, but when something does happen, we'll be able to say which position or aspect is more likely to be tied to what happened and build an astrological profile from there. Now that it's cleared, we can proceed with our investigation. Moon represents emotions, emotional safety, intuition, relationship with the mother, and family tradition. Moon in Aries is bold and has pronounced instant gratification streak, so keep in mind these things when we talk about the cases of Aries serial killers with Moon in Aries. Also, I encourage you to try to find similarities between these 4 cases while you listen and comment down below if you found more similarities than me. The 4 killers with Moon in Aries we'll be analyzing in this video are Denis Pischikov from Russia, Henri Landru from France, Nikita Lytkin, another one from Russia, and Judy Buenoano from the USA, the only Aries woman with Moon in Aries. Then again, there are far less female serial killers in general, 95 in total, compared to 984 males. You remember this if you watched the rankings video. If you haven't already, I'll leave the link in the description box. Denis Pischikov, whose serial killer moniker is the Shivering Creature, was born on April 12, 1983, in Bulanash, Sverdlovsk Oblast, and had a congenital disease, though we don't know exactly which one. By all accounts, he grew up in a loving family with one older sister who was arrested for theft in 2004. Everything was going well for him up until 1991, when his father, Sergei Pischikov, died. From then on, his mother, Yuba, had to take care of the family. She was working at the Artemovsky radio plant. We can conclude that her relationship with her son was at least normal, and that she can be put in the category of abusive mothers. Just a note, we'll consider abusive parents as those who physically and verbally abuse their children by hitting them, molesting them, and verbally degrading them. A passing comment here and there, while it may have an effect on the individual, will not qualify for the parents being classified as abusive. Basically, what we'll consider abusive is what can fall into domestic violence category and serious neglect that can warrant the intervention of social workers, or that is otherwise abnormal parental behavior, such as parents who are extremely controlling. Soon, Denis's mother married Alexander Anushin, an electric locomotive driver, and everything went south from there. Alexander turned out to be an alcoholic who had poor relationship with his stepchildren. Denis started misbehaving and dropped out of school in 5th grade. He was a hooligan and a thief who was regularly taken to the police station. However, despite all this, he was described as a modest and shy guy. Not much is known about his life before his first murder. This is often a case with serial killers whose cases didn't get the infamous status. While we know so much about some serial killers, we often know very little about others, just for the fact that their crimes haven't captivated the imagination of people and therefore haven't received much public attention. This is good from the perspective of not making serial killers into some sort of celebrities with dozens of books, movies, TV shows, and debates going on about their lives and crimes for years and decades after their crimes, but for the purposes of the investigation, we often have scarce information. Nevertheless, even that scarce information can help us in our astrological profiling, as you'll see in this video. Denis Pischikov moved to Moscow in June 2000 and was arrested shortly after for attempting to steal a radio from a car. Here is where his shy guy appearance helped him a lot, and he was released, after which he disappeared. The police did put him on the wanted list, but he was not seriously looked for due to the nature of his crime at that time. This will prove to be a big mistake. Denis moved to Vladimir Oblast, a region that borders Moscow Oblast. He was staying there with a friend, but soon he got a girlfriend and moved in with her. At first, he worked in the construction of country houses and even in a tire store, but it didn't satisfy his appetite for getting easy money. This is why he embarked on a killing spree, essentially to steal money from the elderly, and would even bring that money home, telling his girlfriend that he earned it by having a regular job, that he obviously didn't have. Denis targeted both males and females, all of who were the retired elderly people who mostly lived alone. Pischikov had a clear preference for the elderly because he considered them easy targets. They couldn't defend themselves, they lived alone, and usually kept cash in their own houses. His victims were preferential because he clearly targeted one age group and wasn't indiscriminate like many other serial killers. One curiosity is that he would often take food from the fridge of the people he had killed, and he would sometimes even eat that food right there at the crime scene. He committed his first murder on March 29, 2002, when he stole 3,000 rubles from the house of his victim. On March 18, 2003, he committed two separate murders, stealing 950 rubles and a sausage. He committed his last murder on April 3, 2003, when he killed a pensioner and attacked his 50-year-old daughter, who happened to be there. Miraculously, she survived. Pischikov killed a total of 14 victims before he was arrested on April 5, 2003. In his petition for clemency, he wrote, "Have pity on me. Anything but life." Sure thing, the judge didn't have pity on him and sentenced him to life imprisonment, as it should be. Denis Pischikov's only motive for killing was to get the easy money and occasional sausage. He didn't sexually assault his victims either while they were alive or after their death, so his crimes were not erotomania motivated. This indicates that he is a criminal enterprise killer who falls into felony murder category, that is, a killer who kills during a commission of a robbery or some other crime, but it's more often robbery we're talking about. To sum it up, Denis Pischikov came from a loving family. Neither mother nor father were abusive. Father died early. He had a bad relationship with his alcoholic stepfather. He was described as shy and modest guy. He did poorly in school. He had a girlfriend. He started stealing early on, so he had criminal history prior to murders. He targeted elderly people. His motive was criminal enterprise. We'll see how this compares to the other three Aries serial killers who share Moon in Aries. The next case I'll be presenting you is that of Henri Landru, aka the Bluebeard of Gambay, who was born on April 12, 1869 in France. While he is relatively unknown in the rest of the world, he is one of the most infamous serial killers in France. This also means that we have more information on him than on some other serial killers. Henri Landru was a wanted child, suggested by his middle name, which means desire. He grew up in a normal, loving family. His father was a chauffeur and his mother was a laundress. His father committed suicide in 1913, allegedly because he couldn't take the fact that his beloved son had become a criminal. Like Pischikov, he had an older sister. His childhood was quiet and happy, and by all accounts, it was a quite uneventful childhood. He was raised Catholic and was educated by the monks in the Catholic Church. At some point, he even served as an altar boy, and by his late teens, he graduated to subdeacon. His greatest desire was to become a famous inventor, which probably led him into crime, and you'll see why. In 1898, he designed a primitive motorbike, which he called the Landru, and deceived several potential investors into giving him the money to build a factory to manufacture his motorbike, after which he simply vanished. His other projects included a plan for a new suburban railway line west of Paris and an automated children's toy. He drifted from one job to the next and was employed for short periods in Paris as a plumber's accountant, a furniture salesman, and an assistant to a toy maker. Henri Landru married Marie-Catherine, whom he met at the church mass. She later described their encounter. "We got talking as we were leaving the church, and so my love story began. With Marie-Catherine, Landru had 4 children. He wasn't much present in their lives, but when he was with his family, he was a model husband and father, though he was also a skirt chaser. The reason he didn't see his family as often was because he was constantly on the run from the police. He was first arrested in 1904 as he was running away from a bank. For the next decade, Landru was in and out of prison, which is why he saw little of his family. In 1909, he attempted to swindle an affluent widow by posing as a wealthy single businessman and persuading her into giving him all of her savings. Though he was arrested and sentenced to 3 years, this became his habitual ruse later on when he started killing women. Landru had a perfect command of language and could easily seduce women. He was also a compulsive liar who even used various false names throughout his life, such as Nattier, Frémier, Crochet, and Dupont. He committed his first murder in January or February 1915 by killing a widowed seamstress and her 17-year-old son. In the next 4 years, he would kill at least 11 women. He would usually meet them by posting false matrimonial ads, where he claimed to be the next consul general to Australia in need of a wife to host diplomatic receptions, or by saying that he needed a wife to join him in the pretty colony of Tunisia. What he actually wanted was their money. He basically killed women to relieve them of their assets, which makes his motives linked to criminal enterprise. We don't know how he actually killed his victims, so other possible motives, such as erotomania, can't be established. While we don't know how he did it, we can guess with pretty great accuracy how he disposed of the bodies, by burning them in the big oven he had in his house when he was living in Gambay. For quite some time, the neighbors would often see smoke coming from the chimney on the house he rented, which in itself wasn't unusual, as there was no electricity back then. But from time to time, the smoke had foul smell that definitely wasn't common, and villagers didn't know exactly what it was until, one day, a local priest fell asleep next to a chimney in his own house and accidentally burned to death. The foul smell emanating from his chimney was the same that came from Landru's house. Police never found the bodies of the missing women, but they found the bodies of 2 dogs in the shed. In Landru's garage in Clichy, they found piles of females' clothing, women's undergarments, wicker dolls, wigs, hairpieces, set of dentures, set of false teeth, and the most damning evidence, 2 black notebooks. One was a diary, and another one contained strange, almost cryptic sales, like gas oven sale, rug sale, and so on. In the diary, he noted his encounters with women, and that list contained the names of at least 4 disappeared women. People remember that they would often see Landru going to his house with different women, but would leave alone, and no one saw those women come out alive. Henri Désiré Landru was executed by the guillotine on February 25, 1922. Let's sum this up. Henri Désiré Landru comes from a normal, loving family. Both parents were non-abusive. His father killed himself because he couldn't take that his beloved son turned criminal. He had big dreams of becoming a famous inventor. He was a swindler and a fraud. He used different fake names. He was married and had 4 children. He was in and out of prison before he committed his first murder. His choice of victims was preferential. He targeted widows with or without children, as well as sex workers. All but one of his victims were female. He killed to relieve women of their assets, which puts his motives into criminal enterprise category. Landru disposed of the bodies in the oven. He kept note of his encounters with his victims. He would usually meet potential victims through Lonely Hearts ads. As you can see, we have far more information available for Landru's case than Pischikov's, despite Landru being born in the 19th century and committed his crimes while the First World War was still raging. Pischikov's case didn't get that much attention, so our our knowledge of the intimate details from his life is limited. Where it is possible that there are far more similarities between them than we will ever know about, you can already see the pattern forming. And now let's see how the other two Aries serial killers with Moon in Aries compare to Denis Pischikov and Henri Landru. The next case is that of the youngest born Aries serial killer, Nikita Lytkin, who was born on March 24, 1993 in Irkutsk, Russia. This is the only case of Aries Sun, Aries Moon serial killer where we're talking about serial killer pairs. Nikita's father left shortly after he was born, remarried, and got a son with his second wife, but when she died and their son committed suicide, he came back to Nikita's mother Marina. As they say, second times rarely turn out good, and he would leave Nikita and his mother several times in the following years. In fact, the last time Nikita saw his father was when he was 16. Nikita's mother Marina worked in a shoe shop. She tried her best to provide as much as she could to her son. When his mental state started deteriorating in his teens, Marina tried to help him and took him to various psychologists, but it didn't work. Nikita was a quiet kid who didn't like communicating with others. He had only one friend in school, but even that relationship fell apart. Prior to 5th grade, Nikita was a good student and often participated in creative contests. When he was in 5th grade, he was put in a class with advanced math, something he disliked profoundly. He started skipping school and was expelled from 9 classes, mostly because he failed the exams, but in one case, it was because he was extorting money from a group of boys. Generally speaking, he was bullied in school, but wasn't completely defenseless. He met Artyom Anufriev, who was 1 year older than him, precisely at that one friend's party, and they quickly became friends. The two created a punk rock band called Evil Dwarves, and they even released one full-length album in 2008 called Black Streaks of Blood. They then created a new band called Dismembered Pugacheva. The duo started being interested in the neo-Nazi movement and even participated in the annual nationalist demonstration, the Russian March. They read various extremist content, including a book Born to Hate. However, the Jews started seeing Nazi and other extremist ideologies as too soft. They wanted to imitate various serial killers and saw the most prolific Aries male serial killer, Alexander Pichushkin, as their hero. By the way, I did mention both Alexander Pichushkin and Nikita Lytkin in the video about Aries serial killers. You can check the link in the description box. Up until now, we've had Aries serial killers who killed alone. There is a great difference between lone killers and group killers. Sure thing, a lone killer may have a willing or an unwilling accomplice who may participate in the murder itself, but usually helps dispose of the body. However, the reasons behind the murder fall exclusively on the lone killer. In the case of group killers, they plan the murder together and greatly influence one another. It's usually a deadly combo, meaning that on their own they probably wouldn't have done anything, but when they come together, they get the courage to do the unthinkable. This is why classifying Nikita Lytkin's criminal profile on its own can be challenging, because his motives and behaviors are forever linked to those of Artyom Anufriev, and when it comes to some decisions the duo made, we can't say for sure whose idea it was, or if they would have done it differently, or maybe even not at all, if they were alone. However, no matter what, their killings can be classified under group cause. Since they were obviously thrill seekers and linked to Nazi ideology, their group cause motives can be classified under group excitement and extremist homicide that can be motivated by political, religious, and/or socioeconomic reasons. Another thing, when 2 or more people kill together, they will often later on blame each other, painting themselves as the reluctant participant in the other's devious plans. The same is true in this case. Anufriev later claimed that the idea for murder came from Lytkin and that killings didn't give Anufriev the satisfaction he had hoped for. Nikita, on the other hand, claimed that he wouldn't have killed anyone if it wasn't for Anufriev. The public saw Artyom Anufriev as the instigator, as he came from a troubled family and had a controlling mother. He was the one who joined the skinheads and got into the National Socialists. The prevailing opinion is that Artyom Anufriev was the ideological instigator, while Lytkin was the performer. Anufriev and Lytkin first attacked on November 14th, 2010. They beat up an 18-year-old girl by smashing her head, probably with a hammer, but miraculously she survived the attack. The police officer didn't bother to investigate because she hadn't been robbed. She took it to an online forum describing her ordeal. The duo contacted her on the forum asking her to describe what she felt during the attack. They attacked again on November 24th, 2010. This time it was a 46-year-old woman. She survived, but they stole her bag. The duo committed their first murder on December 1st, 2010. They first attacked one woman and stole her bag, but ran away because they were spotted by some passerbys. The same day, the duo saw saw a 12-year-old Daniel Semyonov who was going for a ride on a hill with his snow scooter. Lytkin suggested that they kill him, and Onufriev agreed. They stunned the child from behind by hitting him on the head with a mallet, then proceeded to beat him with a baseball bat. This type of attack is called blitz attack, as it is supposed to quickly incapacitate the victim. It's usually used by insecure and/or physically weak attackers who don't want to risk the victim striking back or defending themselves. What is absolutely shocking about this murder is that the police ruled his death a car accident, blaming the boy for driving his snow scooter too fast and hitting a tree. And while they had their case solved and blissfully returned to their other duties, the Onufriev-Lytkin duo continued killing. The two committed a total of 6 murders and 15 attacks. They would blitz attack in plain daylight by hitting their victims on the head with a mallet, and then proceed to hitting them with a mallet, a hammer, beating them, and stabbing them with a knife. Their choice of victims was completely indiscriminate, unlike the previous 2 cases, where the perpetrators had clear preference for one type of the victim. They would commit post-mortem mutilation by cutting the ears and fingers, and even try to gouge out the eyes of one of the victims. They would sometimes steal personal belongings from their victims, such as bags, and sell its contents. While this is definitely not a primary motive for their heinous crimes, at least some part of their criminal activity included criminal enterprise. The duo would make audio recordings of how they would commit the murder, and with the last victim, they actually video recorded the murder itself. Onufriev then sent the video to a friend who posted it online. The duo was arrested on April 5, 2011, having committed their last murder, and filmed it on April 1st. Artyom Onufriev was sentenced to life imprisonment, served in a special regime colony, while Nikita Lytkin was sentenced to only 24 years because he was technically underage when he committed most of the murders. He was to serve 5 years of his sentence in prison and the rest in a special regime colony. On December 1st, 2021, on the 11th anniversary of the first murder, that of a 12-year-old child, Nikita Lytkin killed himself by slashing his wrist. Artyom Onufriev remains incarcerated in a special regime colony. Just for clarification, this special regime colony, and you will encounter it in many Russian cases, is among the harshest prisons in Russia, as it is located in the place with severe winters. Let's sum up Nikita Lytkin's case. He had a normal, caring mother, but had an absent father with whom he had poor relationship. He was quiet and didn't have many friends in school. He was often bullied, but he also extorted money from other kids. He formed a strong bond with Artyom Onufriev. The two were fascinated by Nazi ideology and serial killers. They talked about committing the murders long before they committed the first one. They audio recorded their plans about committing the murders and even video recorded the last murder. Their choice of victims was indiscriminate. They used blitz attack to quickly incapacitate the victim and would then usually beat them to death. They mutilated some of the victims' bodies post-mortem. They stole belongings from some of the victims. The last case we'll be analyzing is the case of Judy Buenoano, who was born on April 4th, 1943 in the USA. She was born Judias Welty. Some say that her real name was Anna Lou Welty, while some state that she got her name after her mother. Why is this important for our classification? Well, we already know that Henri Landru used false names throughout his life, so it's good to know which serial killers also used false names and to what purpose. Judy did use many different names throughout her life, but if we take into account that she actually adopted the last names of her husband and later created a version of one of her husband's last name, Buenoano, we can assume that she wasn't going under false identities and didn't use any of her husband's boyfriend's last name to deceive anyone. Judy's mother died from tuberculosis when she was only 4 years old. While there are claims that both her father and later her stepmother were abusive, there are no such accounts on her biological mother, so we can assume that she was at least normal. It's difficult to guess how things would have turned out if she hadn't died that early, and if she would indeed be the exemplary mother, but we can't say that she would be abusive either, so we'll leave it at that. Given the fact that Judy was third of 4 siblings, and that there are no accounts of her mother being abusive towards her older children, our assumption that she was a non-abusive, normal mother stands on solid grounds. After her mother died, her father sent her and her baby brother Robert to live with grandparents, while the older 2 siblings were put for adoption. separation. Her father remarried, and Judy later claimed that, after she was reunited with her father, both her father and her stepmother abused her, starving her and forcing her to work as a slave. She also claimed that she was being beaten and burned with cigarettes. Oh, the reason I say Judy claimed is because throughout her life she was known to be a habitual liar. However, one thing is definitely true. When she was 14, she spent 2 months in prison for attacking her father, her stepmother, and 2 stepbrothers. By the way, she poured scalding grease on her stepbrothers. Now, we don't know why she did it, but given that she was only 14 and that her father didn't want to take care of her after the death of her mother, I wouldn't say her reaction was unprovoked, however exaggerated it was. After the prison, and I say prison and not juvie because she shared it with adult sex workers, she attended reforming school and graduated in 1960 as a nursing assistant. She later lied that she had a PhD in anatomy and other medical fields. On March 30th, 1961, Judice gave birth to an illegitimate son she named Michael Schultz and changed her name to Anna Schultz. In 1962, she married James Goodyear, an Air Force officer. She lied on her marriage certificate, stating that she was 4 years older than she actually was, but this was probably because she wanted to appear older when she was actually 18. James and Judy got their first child, James Goodyear Jr., in 1966 and a daughter, Kimberly, in 1967. Judy had a horrible relationship with her eldest son, Michael. She put him in foster care because he was misbehaving in school and for having a poor academic performance. Michael actually scored dull to normal on IQ tests of that time. Poor Michael spent most of his childhood and teen years in schools for mentally disturbed children and only got to see his siblings around Christmas time. Her friends later testified that Judy even used to hide Michael away when guests were over. Judy seemed to be a good mother to her other children, but she hated Mike for some reason. Mike actually loved his mother and craved her love and attention, but instead she called him stupid and an idiot and even made him sleep in the basement while they were living in Trinidad. It's horrible when any parent treats their child like this, but it's even more incomprehensible when that same parent was abused as a child like Judy claimed she was. It seems that James Goodyear was a far better stepfather than she was a mother, as he adopted Mike after the birth of their first son, James Jr. The family moved to Orlando, Florida, where Judy opened the Conway Acres Child Care Center, listing her husband as co-owner. James Sr. was barely home because he was often deployed to different countries. When he came back from Vietnam, he started feeling unwell, and after only 3 months, he was admitted to the U.S. Naval Hospital in Orlando, but the physicians couldn't really figure out what he was suffering from. In September 1971, James Sr. Goodyear died of what was believed to be natural causes. Judy waited 5 days before cashing in his 3 life insurance policies. One strange thing occurred not long after James Sr. died. Their home in Orlando caught fire. Bad luck, isn't it? Of course not, because the poor widow, Judy Goodyear, got $90,000 in fire insurance. The following year, 1972, Judy found a new boyfriend and moved her family to Pensacola to live with him. This new boyfriend was Bobby Joe Morris. And guess what? Their house caught fire too, so Judy cashed in more fire insurance money. The family then moved to Trinidad to live with Bobby. On January 4th, 1978, Bobby Morris was admitted to San Rafael Hospital, but like in the case of the late James Goodyear, doctors couldn't find what was wrong with him. He was released to Judy's care on January 21st, but 2 days later he was rushed back to the hospital where he died on January 28th. This time doctors attributed his death to cardiac arrest and metabolic acidosis. Like in the case of James Goodyear, Judy cashed in 3 life insurance policies in Bobby's name just a few days after his death. On May 3rd, 1978, Judy legally changed her last name and that of her children to Buenoano, her version of the Spanish translation of Goodyear. I don't know who told her that Goodyear translates to Buenoano in Spanish, as the correct translation would be Buen Año or Año Bueno, but I guess she thought it sounded good. Anyhow, the family moved back to Pensacola. Mike Buenoano dropped out of school and joined the army in June 1979. On his way to his post, Mike stopped to visit his mother. During his visit, he fell ill and was showing symptoms of base metal poisoning. In the span of 6 weeks, the muscles of his arms and lower legs had atrophied so much that he had to wear braces as he was not able to walk or use his hands on his own. On May 13, 1980, Judy took Mike and her younger son, James Jr., canoeing. As you might imagine, the canoe overturned and poor Mike drowned because there was no way he could have saved himself. His heavy braces added to the weight, and he sank like a stone. Once again, local authorities accepted Judy's version of the event and closed it as an accident, but the military did open their own investigation. Judy cashed in Mike's military life insurance policy, but the military investigators found various civil policies in his name which naturally raised suspicion. Meanwhile, Judy opened a beauty parlor in Gulf Breeze and started dating Pensacola businessman John Gentry. She had a taste for expensive gifts, imported champagne, and Caribbean cruises, and Gentry enjoyed indulging her every whim. In October 1982, John and Judy purchased life insurance policies on one another, and, unbeknownst to John, Judy boosted his life insurance policy from $50,000 to $500,000. Wanting her boyfriend to have a long and happy life, Judy started giving him vitamin pills that unsurprisingly produced dizziness and vomiting. Judy seemed to be in a hurry, and John, although ill, wasn't dying soon enough, so she planted a bomb in his car. She had told him she was pregnant with his child, which wasn't true, and poor John was very happy. He wanted to celebrate the happy news with Judy, so one night on June 25, 1983, after a dinner party, John Gentry got into his car, put the key into ignition, and the car exploded. Miraculously, he survived. In hospital, John found out that most of the things Judy had told him had been a lie, including that she was pregnant, as she was surgically sterilized in 1975. John gave the police the vitamins Judy had been giving him, and lo and behold, they found paraformaldehyde in the pills. John now knew that his loving girlfriend was a vicious murderer, but police also had evidence that they had a murderer and a possible serial killer on their hands. Judy was arrested in her beauty shop on charges of attempted murder. On January 11, 1984, she was indicted for first-degree murder in the death of her son. Bobby Morris was exhumed, and toxicology found large doses of arsenic in his body. Judy Buenoano was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. For the deaths of James Sr. Goodyear, she was sentenced to death and was executed by the electric chair on March 30, 1998. Now let's sum up Judy Buenoano's case. Mother died when Judy was 4. There are no accounts that she was abusive. Judy's father and stepmother were abusive. Judy got in trouble early and spent some time in prison as a teen. She was a pathological liar. She hated her illegitimate son Michael, but liked her other children. She poisoned her victims. Judy started 2 fires, which puts her into the category of arsonist. She killed her victims mainly because of life insurance policies, which puts her motives almost entirely in the criminal enterprise category. Judy was the first woman to be executed in Florida since 1848. As you can see, all 4 cases are quite different from one another, but there are some similarities that can definitely be connected to Aries Sun, Aries Moon combination. The first one is that all serial killers had non-abusive mothers. Some were good, some were normal, but none could have been characterized as abusive. Again, by abusive, we should put physical, verbal, and emotional abuse, but we have to be careful not to categorize normal parenting as abuse. However, the child may dislike being grounded when they misbehave, or if a parent makes an occasional ill-fitted comment that the child may take to heart. They might have had arguments, like in the case of Nikita Lytkin, but who doesn't occasionally have arguments with their parents, especially in adolescence? It's all part of the normal relationship between parents and children. It's actually quite fitting that having Sun and Moon in the same sign is an indicator of a non-abusive and even loving mother. There is no difference between the character and the personality of the child, between their wants and needs. This means that the child didn't receive mixed messages from their mother, and that they were allowed to develop the character that is the same as their personality. They didn't have to mellow it down, put it on 11, or develop a completely different character. This, of course, is not a conscious decision on either the mother's or child's part. It's just how child naturally perceives the mother and how they, again naturally, develop. This doesn't mean that having Sun and Moon in the same sign will somehow create a balanced person, as it depends on the sign and the rest of the chart. On the other hand, having Sun and Moon in the same sign also means that both positive and negative sides of the sign will be far more pronounced. On the side note, all 4 killers had siblings. Denis Pischikov had an older sister. Henri Landru also had an older sister. Nikita Lytkin had a younger half-brother, and Judy Buenoano is the third of 4 children. Now, we have to be wary of the fact that we don't know all the details about all the killers. As we've said, there are far more details of the lives of the killers whose cases gained some level of notoriety than in the case of those who didn't. And here we'll often have cases where we have too much information on some killers and too little on others. It's almost impossible to have all the necessary information about all the cases. cases. This means that there may be far more similarities between killers with the same planetary positions and aspects than we can possibly know. If you do have additional information on these 4 killers, please provide it in the comments with the source you got it from so that I can check it out. This is something that is common among serial killers of all planetary positions, but it's still worth mentioning. All 4 had prior criminal offenses that are unrelated to the murders. Denis Pischikov attempted to steal a radio from a car when he arrived in Moscow. Henri Landru was convicted of theft and fraud much before he started killing. Nikita Lytkin was extorting money from the boys at school, and Judy Buenoano ended up in prison for assaulting her stepbrothers. And now to the most surprising part, all 4 killers committed crimes that can be classified under criminal enterprise. That is, all 4 had the element of money involved in their killings. To be precise, all except Nikita Lytkin killed exclusively for financial gain. They wanted to get easy money without working and decided that the best way to do it was to kill people, either to rob them or to collect life insurance money. Nikita Lytkin's case has the elements of criminal enterprise because the two did steal bags from some of the victims. Now we must differentiate 2 types of stealing: trophies or keepsakes and stealing for money. The first type, which is none of the 4, steals valuable or invaluable objects from their victims. It can be anything from a necklace to the underpants, with the intention of keeping them as trophies or because they'll help them in reliving the memories of their crimes. The other type steals to sell those objects and usually doesn't steal anything that can be sold, such as the underpants. Nikita Lytkin and Artyom Onufriev did sell the content of the bags and even bought a hammer with the money they got. And they used that hammer to attack other victims. They definitely didn't keep the bags or the content of the bags if they couldn't sell it. Denis Pischikov killed exclusively for the money. He targeted pensioners who lived alone and kept their valuables in their house. He was after easy money. Henri Landru also wanted to get money and assets from his victims. We don't know what preceded the killings, how he killed them, and if there was anything else going on, but we can say with certainty that he was motivated by money. Judy Buenoano's case is even more obvious, as she literally killed so that she could cash in the insurance money. Sure thing, the reason for killing Michael might have been hatred as well, but even that murder is motivated by money. Now it's your turn. Have you found more similarities? Which comparison would you like to see next? Stay tuned for more astrological profiling videos.